Welcome to SIG Cougar Build Part 8, the formers. Last time you were watching, Part 7 I hope, we just finished up with the bevel on the fuselage, the very back of the fuselage. And you remember I said to measure in and measure back and cut your bevel. But there's one thing I forgot to mention, was that on the top of the fuselage is just a bit shorter than the bottom. I don't know if you can see this or not, but hold my triangle up to it, my square. You can see there's quite a gap right there. It's about 3/8 of an inch. So when you cut your top bevel on the top of the fuselage, cut the bevel, keep that in mind that it's going to be shorter. So you take the bevel from this point, 3/8 in, and measure up and cut your bevel. Alright, let's get on to placing some formers. Now we're on step 65, and they say to lay your fuselage down and set your formers in. Use your square them up, and glue them in. Well, that's good. You can do it that way, but on some of these, not particularly these, but like this one doesn't even fit. I mean, it's. Let me turn this a little bit. Maybe you can see that there's a gap at the bottom, and it's just rocking. So I'm going to have to recut these angles to get this to fit correctly. And it's going to be the same back here, I'm sure. So I'm going to take a little time and cut that out correctly, because it's not even matching up to the fuselage. It won't even go all the way. And if I do put it in all the way, it's not setting level with my bench. So that means it's not going to be level with the top either. So I have to cut in new angles. This side doesn't seem to be as bad as this side. So we'll have to do a little bit of sanding, you know, straighten them out just a little bit. I can see there's a little flashing where the die cut didn't quite get a straight line, so that could be the problem. But I'll take care of that. Like I was saying that they say to put them in here like this and glue them in. But one thing about that, it doesn't guarantee that it's going to be flush with the top of the fuselage. I found that in past Cougars, when you do it this way and you get it all glued up, then you find out that this former, even though it's cut with a 45, is below the triangular stock at the top. So what I like to do is build it vertically like this. Use my square up the sides, which is already done. Everything's nice and square. Pin it down to my bench, then take my former and slide my former in like that. Use my square it up with the fuselage both ways, and get it nice and square. Glue it in, hold it for a second, give it a squirt, because we're going to be using CA for this. Then you know for sure that that bulkhead is going to be in there square. And by the time you're done, the overall straightness of your plane or your fuselage will be a little bit better. So we're going to do it this way instead of this way. Alright, give me a second. I'm going to zoom in to this section here where we're going to drop in the two formers, and we'll begin. To set these bulkheads in, I'm going to be using medium gap filling CA glue and a little bit of accelerator to get things going a little quicker. So first off, punch out the center, which is in there pretty good. Try to be careful not to crack your former in half. I've done that before, that's no fun. And get your former about where you want it. That's pretty close. Okay. So I can put it either way. I got lines. Let's see. Here we go. I got my lines here. If I want that showing to the inside of the fuselage for future alignment, that'd be a good way to go. Otherwise, they're going to be the inside of the fuel compartment or the fuel tank compartment, and I won't be able to see them anymore. So I'm going to go this way. Alright, let's get some glue. I had to find a new nozzle to put on this thing. It was wasted. Let's see, how far do I have to go? I'm going to mark my glue line at the top of the former on the side. Put that in place. Just so I know how far up the fuselage or the side of the former I have to put my glue, which is right about in here. Whoa, a little much. And you run it down around the 45 where the triangular stock goes. I have wax paper down on my bench on top of my paper. I'm going to put a little bit on the back side against the former. And since it's a medium, I have a little time. Where's my square? To get it situated. And I can see it's way off. That looks 90 degrees square that way. That's pretty square that way. Double check. And it's flat against the top of the former, is flat against my bench. That's square. That's square. Double check. Measure 100 times before you hit it with your accelerant. There we go. Give it a spritz. Now I'll keep checking it until I can let go. That's pretty good. Right there. Keep checking it until I know it's set up. Okay, good. We'll let that set a moment and cure up a little better, then I'll be back and we'll set the next one in. F2 is in place and glued, and now we're going to be sticking in F3. And you can see earlier that, if you can remember, earlier I marked these F1, F2, F3, and this is F3, and F3 has a top and a bottom. They don't really mention that in the book, but it does. Their angle cuts are set for this little bit right here, because this is tapered in. As you can see right here on this cut, it's tapered in. And if you put it upside down, it's not going to fit. You can see that that former's sticking way up and it's short on the top. But if you flip it over, it fits in there just like it's supposed to. So we'll get this squared up in here, just like the other one. I'm going to run glue from here to here. Put it up around the corner. Put it on my lines where I marked the formers. Get my head around here so I can see what I'm doing. Somewhere abouts in there. Check the squareness of my fuselage side to the bench. Square it this way. And square it this way. Try to find that nice little sweet spot here where everything lines up. That's that. And it's not set vertically by almost 1/8 of an inch. So my former lines, according to the plans, are wrong. Or according to the side of the fuselage. So square it up this way. Square it up this way. Vertically, horizontally, and it's on there. Give it a kick. Check for squareness. And hold her steady until it's done. I just wiggled it, didn't I? Sure did. Looks pretty good right there. Okay, when this dries, I'll be back and we'll go on to the next step. One more thing before we move on, and something that I do on formers on a lot of planes, and that's add these little triangle pieces right here. Two on each side, top and bottom, and the front over here. And that just gives it a little bit more rigidity to the formers. According to the book, they want you to use epoxy to put these in, but that takes a long time for it to set and cure, and I believe CA glue in most cases holds just as well as an epoxy. So I just wanted to show you that because I'm going to do it onto this side of the fuselage also. And what I do is I just take a old piece of 1/4 inch square, and I'll cut about 1.5 inches, 1.25 inches. Then I'll cut it this way through the diagonal, and then I'll cut that in half, and that gives me 4 pieces. And I'll do that twice, and that gives me enough for the 2 formers. Just wanted to clue you in on that. That's kind of a extra tip that you might want to use on other airplanes as well as a Cougar. Now that we have the formers glued on, that kind of concludes step 65, and which brings us to step 66, and that's the reason I have this sticking up here. For those of you who want to, let me find something to point with, cut the plans, because this is the center pop out I told you about, our little center fold here. And if you cut the plans, let's say right through here, you can mate this piece to this piece of the fuselage. It's just basically the front part of the fuselage. It shows the formers and things, and it's just for alignment purposes and lining up your fuselage to bring them together. What I did, or what I like to do, is I don't use this. I just measure it out onto this piece of paper right here, and I draw my formers on there where they're supposed to be, and then I start the building process, you know, putting the sides together and squaring it up and things like that. So I just wanted to show you this to let you know that you can cut the centerfold in half. You can see the 2 fuselage sides. They got little X marks, you know, to line up, and tape it together, stick it on your bench, and you build off the top of that. Okay, with that being said, we're going to move on to the way I do it. So let me get the camera straightened around and zoomed into where we need to be. Now we're close to the paper. You can see my center line, and I've pinned the side of the fuselage down. I've moved it from where it was before to here. Line up my center lines from my formers on the center line on the paper, and you can see that the measurements weren't quite right because I took these off of those plans. But it's close enough that I can get alignment on it. This former has a warp in it, so I'm holding it in place at 90 degrees with a pin. So that's what that's all about. Got 2 pins here holding it flat. I have my square, and everything is squared up just nice. And the next thing I have to do, before I get to that, The reason that I'm at the edge of the table is because of the firewall. And you can see that this back plate is the inset part that we trim the the triangular stock. Lost my train of thought here. And what this does is it sits right against the edge of the table. This little lip sits on top of the table like that. It sits there like that, and that can be glued in basically with the rest of this when I slide it all together like so. And that's really all there is to it. And all I'm going to do is run the glue on the formers. I'm going to set this firewall on there, and that I will epoxy on. And to hold it together, I'm going to use these clamps. I have no idea where I got these from. I have no idea who the manufacturer is, but it uses rubber bands for tension. You can spread them quite a ways. Clamps onto your fuselage like that, so when I get them glued, I'll just clamp it up like that, let it sit for a while, and she should be good to go. So let me dump a little glue here, get started. And I have to make sure that this side of the fuselage, this side here, is flush with the edge. So I'm going to hold my motor mount up once I get it glued and get it where it's supposed to be, and then I'll clamp it. So let me find my glue. And this time I'm going to put the glue on the wood. Let me move this out of the way so you can see what I'm doing. And I'm going to use a pretty generous amount. And the back one. I'm also going to put some on the former. And I'll just let that drip underneath. Alright, slide that in place, firewall, put that on the end, nice and flush, slide my fuselage up to it, looks pretty good, take the firewall off, expand my clamps, clamp them down, front, rear, right on, clamping it right on the former. And that is all I can do until it hardens up. It looks pretty good. Things look like it's right where it's supposed to be. I'm going to put a little bit more glue back here behind this triangular stock piece in the former. Bring that up tight. Got a little extra blowing on the inside. It looks like it has a little warp in it, so I'm going to use a pin to hold it back in place. Doesn't have to be really super tight or anything, just nudging it, nudging it back into place. I have to move this clamp. Just like that. Double check my firewall status here. Last thing I need to have is some accidental thrust put in, because that would really screw things up. That looks pretty good. Feels right. I can push on the firewall and nothing's moving. I'm pushing on the fuselage side and it's not sliding forward. And now to hold it in place, I'm going to set some of these pins on the inside. It just keeps it from being bumped around. Alright,
And you can use tape. Use the old masking tape. Put a strap of it here and just maybe 2 straps up here. Something like that to hold it together. And that's as far as we can go until this dries. So we'll let it sit a few minutes, and I'm going to put my little triangle pieces inside, and then I'll be back. Well, it's another day, and you're probably thinking, wow, he has the formers in already, so I'm not going to get to see it. Well, I'm going to show it to you. I wanted to show it to you like this because I had some difficulties with my equipment, my video equipment. So I'm going to show you bits and pieces of how I got to this point, because putting in the formers is not a real big deal. Basically, what they want you to do in the book is to pinch fuselage sides close together, put F4 in, and glue it in, pin the fuselage sides as you go, both sides. Work your way back to F5, put F5 in while you're squeezing it, and then glue the back. Well, that's what I was doing, and the problem I had was when I pinched back here on F5, and I didn't notice it, I don't know why, but I put F5 in and I glued it and it wouldn't stay. It was just too much pressure back here. So that left me with the mess inside. I had to break F5 apart out of the fuselage, recut my bevel to get it to fit correctly. Once I pinched it, it was pinching against F5 when I was done, and now it's still drying. So yeah, I make a lot of mistakes. That's just me. That's what I get for not checking things first. So what I suggest when you build your Cougar is to install your F4, pinch your back of your fuselage together, slide in your F5, and just kind of make sure everything fits before you try to glue F5 in. So let me get things rolling here. I'm going to take you a little bit back in time to yesterday, show you a few clips on how I got to this point. Alright, let me get my glue on here. I'm going to put some on the inside and some on the outside. We'll start with the inside. Okay, I'll put some on the former. And when I pop these formers out, I sanded off the edges because light ply has a bad tendency to get all jaggedy, kind of like that. I don't know if you can see that or not, but that's a pain, so I had to sand them down. Get this lined up. I'm going to pinch it together like they say. Make sure I have this exactly where I want it. That looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cheat. Instead of pinching it together, I'm going to pinch the sides with these clamps. Make sure they get lined up on my... I have where the two come together in the back, the two sides. I have that point on my center line that I've drawn. Okay, I'll pinch that together, and while that's drying, I'm going to pin the fuselage in place, and it just so happens my F4 is right on the mark. I have the center lines marked on my formers. You can see, like on F5, the center line's drawn. F4 is the same way, and when I put it in there and draw the sides in, it's perfectly lined up on the center line. That was not much good. And they say to pin it all the way back as I go. And that is on, let's see, step 69. 68 was putting in F4 Now we're working our way back to step number 69. And it says continue back along the fuselage, gluing in F5 and pinning the sides of the building board. So that's what we're going to be doing up until step 70, and then it says pinch the sides together at the back and glue and pin. So we're just basically sticking it together. And a few more pins. Yeah. That should work. Release the tension here. See if that don't spring. Nope, that's gonna hold. Now I'll stick the glue to it. I'm gonna put it on the inside first. On the triangle stock, all the way down. This is a tight quarter, so a lot of it's gonna end up dripping. And here, put enough in there where it drips down. Now I'll do the sides of the former. And I'm putting kind of a generous amount on there. Just as a side note, when I put F4 in and pinch the sides and everything, the center line that I drew on there lined up perfectly with my center line I drew on the sheet of paper that I'm building on. And it seems like F5 is going to be doing the same thing. So I need to pinch that down. So I'm going to use these big clamps here. Put that a little lower. Oh, now we got a problem. Not the easiest thing to do. This last one. It can be a little bit of a pain. Try this again. Get it lined up. This is not cooperating. There it is. That's what I wanted to do in the first place. Still not quite there. There it is. Okay. Let's speed up the drying process here. Put a lot of kicker on it to hold it in place. And I'm going to be stuck here holding this thing for a while, so I'm going to take a break and be back momentarily. Well, now you know how I got up to this point. So what is next? We go to the book, and it basically takes us all the way down to step 71, and that's to add the part FB, which is right here. Have to cut it out of the sheet, and it's on the sheet with the horizontal stab and the vertical stab pieces, and that will go, it's about as wide as this ruler right here, but it's going to sit right up against F3. And what has to be done with it is, once we cut it out, we have to cut the 45s of the triangular stock in it, slide it up in there and glue it. Probably hold it from underneath here and pinch it up against the back here. So that's not too tough. So let me grab my knife and I'm going to resituate things and cut this thing out. Here's our FB piece, and I'm just going to use a number 11 blade on my scalpel and this little ruler, which happens to be the exact same size and width of FB, but I'm not going to use it like this because it makes it a little more difficult for me, but instead I'll be dropping it onto the lines and cutting it out.
So I'll show you a little bit of that, and then I'll break away because I know you've seen people cut out parts 100,000 times. So here we go. And I'm going to cut just on the outside of the line. And make sure my blade's 90 degrees the best I can. This doesn't have to be super accurate. It just has to be cut to the dimensions they want, that's all. Cut off the end outside the line. And cutting cross grain is always a little tougher. Alright, don't need the ruler now. Have the cut already started. And there it is. Now there's the part. That's FB. I have the angles cut in it. And all I did was use my miter box. Slid it in there. Like so. And, you know, just cut it off with the saw both ways. And it gives me the correct angle for the triangular stock. And it sits in there just like that. So now we need to add the glue. And it's just medium set CA again. And I'm using a generous amount because I don't want it to come loose. And I need to put some on this side, almost forgot. But have quite a bit of glue on here. Set it up in there, kind of hold it. And I'm going to grab a paper towel and wipe off the excess. I don't need that sticking up above. Give her a kick just to keep things moving. There we go. That's the installation of FB. Now let's see. Move over this way. You see step 71 right here. Installation of FB. Now we go to the next page. And you see on 72 is something we've already done, and the book told us to do it, was to notch at the firewall both pieces of triangular stock to fit this piece right here. So that's already done. 72 is complete. Now we need to go to 73, which is to put on the sheeting. So let me rearrange things a little bit, and we'll start on that. I have my camera angle adjusted so you can see down on the project as high as my camera can go on the stand. And what we need to do is take this 3/32 and cut it up into a bunch of pieces to go down the bottom of the fuselage to skin it. I still have an awful lot of pressure on this F5 former. For some reason these sides are like a springboard. They just want to pop out. They're very persistent on its popping apart, so I'm going to leave it like that, and when I get down into here then I can release the clamps and finish it up. It's not a big deal. So what I'm going to do is lay this down, and I've already drew a line to get it square to the rest of the fuselage. And I'm just going to run the pencil underneath the wood, flip it over, cut out a whole bunch of chunks, and when I get that done we'll start laying the skin on the fuselage. I got the sheeting cut out, and that's all these little pieces right down here. They're all in order on how they go onto the fuselage. I measured from F2 to the back of the wing saddle and made it equal on both sides. I drew a line across just for a reference on where to put my first piece. So I'll get the first piece on and kind of stack them up as I go. And you see I put a piece of tape back here because I don't trust this to not pop loose. It didn't when I took the clamps off, but my luck is that as soon as I get down in here, it's going to go poing and I'm going to be upset and I'll have to start over. And the glue we'll use on this is going to be our trusty SIG. And the reason for that is when I start sanding, it's easier to round SIG than it is CA glue. CA glue seems to be harder and a little harder to sand. So I'm going to choose SIG on this, so it's a matter of using pins, sticking them down, doing it the old school way. I know you guys say, well, I can do it much faster with CA glue, just bam, 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 done. But when you break out your sandpaper, you'll notice the difference. So let me change the camera angle, bring it down here, and I'll begin putting the sheeting on and I'll show you a little bit of that. Well, we're now on step 73. And step 73 says, part A, sand the bottom of the fuselage smooth and level with sanding block, as shown being done in the fuselage top in picture number 79. Well, I can tell you, you go to the next page, picture 79 right here shows fuel tank. So that's definitely not it, but it shows it quite well on picture number 81. So that's just the way it goes in some manuals. But this is where we're at. We'll be pinning the fuselage together, 73, and there's 73, and they're showing basically using the same type of glue that I'm going to use and a whole boatload of pins. So I'm going to get started here and start laying up these sheets. And our first sheets, I'm just going to show you what they look like sitting on here. And they're just wide enough to cover the fuselage. And they go all the way back like so. And I'm just going to take them one piece at a time and just a little bit of glue, and then I'll pin it down, and the next one, then the next one, next one. I'll show you a few of them that I do, and then I'll cut away, and because it's all repetitious. Alright, here we go. We'll get these out of the way. Get out the SIG. Oh, I'm a little ahead of myself. Got to mark the end of the sheet. Okay, just about there. And I'll do that to every one of them. And what I like doing is going around the edges first. Inside edge. Then I usually dot it up in the middle. Something like that. Set my piece of wood on here, and then I usually kind of wiggle it around, get it to sit where I want it to, right on the line, and grab some pins and start sticking them in. And one thing you should do is always check to make sure that your sheet overlaps to the outside a little bit. That way when you put your pins in, it's not going to be only like a half on there or something like that. I've done that before. It's not a pleasant surprise when you get to find out what you did. Alright, got a little excess into the wing saddle area. It won't really hurt nothing, but I like cleaning it up.
And a few more pins. Keep it squished down. Couple in the front. Kind of on an angle just to keep the pressure on it. Oops. Now I can't even pick up the pins. Here we go. And that's the first one. And number 2. More glue. Wow, that came out really fast. Now I put some on this edge here. It goes up against the other piece of wood. Squish it around. More pins. And you can use, like I said, you can use your CA glues or whatever, and it'll go twice as fast as this, which is good. There's nothing wrong with that. So that's one thing about building your own plane. You got your own preference. You can do whatever you want to do and not have to stick to what the book says because it's already pre-built. I love being able to choose. Makes my day. Alright. And that's what I'm going to do all the way down. Take off the excess here. All the way down to the end. So I'm going to break away, finish this up, and when I'm done I'll come back. Well, I brought you back for the last 2 pieces. I'm going to do all of these at once, or both of these. And it's just a matter of running a bead of glue down both sides. Another bead of glue on the inside. Like that. A couple of spots in between that look like it's going to be dry when I get done. A bead of glue down a piece of wood like that. Wiggle it a little bit, stick her down, wipe off the excess. I'll pin all of them at once when I get to it. Okay. Now for the last grouping of pins. A few more. These are really big pins here. Need some small ones. Okay, 2 more pins, and we'll call it good.
Well, the glue's still drying. I went outside and did some things and messed up my shirt, so I got a different shirt on. But one thing I want to talk to you about is putting in your pins. People don't think about that too much, but it does make a difference in how you put those pins in. If you notice, all of my pins are in an angle. I put them in all on an angle. So it's least likely for the balsa wood just to lift up if it's on an angle, because you're pushing in against the grain, and if you're straight up and down, and if you hold a piece of balsa wood and poke a pin through, you can slide that piece of balsa up and down on that pin. But if you put it in on an angle, it's least likely to have a problem with the balsa wood lifting, and it keeps it down tighter. Okay, with that said, I think I'm going to wrap up this video. But first, let's see what's up next. Alright. It looks like we got past step 73. We're going to be on step 74. We're going to be putting in the wing hold down screw blocks into the wing saddle. And put a couple of pieces of triangular stock on there to beef them up. Then we'll be going on to step 75, which is the block. And we'll be gluing that down and hollowing it out a little bit and putting on the firewall. But in my case, I'm going to be installing retracts, so I have to make a retract platform, and I'll be cutting out F2. And now that's going to cause a problem, because once I do the cut on the F2, it's going to get squishy, because I'm going to have to cut out the block also for the retract, and that takes away a lot of the front end strength. So I'm going to have to come up with a subformer of some kind to beef up this section. On my last Cougar I didn't do that, and the Cougar before I didn't do that. I was just in a hurry to fly it, and this was a little mushy in the front, but when I stuck the wing on, it's made everything solid. But that's not the proper way to do things, and I need to find a better way to do it. So in the meantime, I'm going to think of a way and make a little pattern, and probably cut out some plywood and maybe a maple block. I'm not sure which way I'm going to go. Whichever comes out lighter is probably the best way to go. Okay. And I know I wanted to get to gluing the stabs and putting the rudder and vertical stab together, but things aren't working out the way I had planned, so I'm going to have to slow things down a little bit and just take it one step at a time so I don't get your hopes up and say, oh yeah, he's going to do this and that, but I don't get to it. Alright. I guess that's going to wrap it up for today. So the next time you come, I'm going to be pulling the pins out, sanding down the sides of the fuselage, and then we'll be getting on to the next step. So I will see you then, and have a good one.